Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome back to another new episode of What If Naruto Was the Red X. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. Now let's start this video. Force outside Jump City, Day 2. Jinx had awoken to a strange sight, namely, Naruto's clones seemingly having a debate. Currently she was watching as the two bickered between one another in Japanese, too fast for her to translate no less. Just because I know little Japanese doesn't mean I can keep up with him when he doesn't want to slow down. Jinx thought to herself with a mental sigh, while one of the clones poked the other in the chest for a moment. It caused the clone to lunge at his partner, both struggling with one another and causing a ruckus, while somehow managing not to damage each other. So this is what Temp was like before he became so well. It's actually kind of hard to place his personality. But in any case, these guys remind me of Beast Boy, only a little less annoying. Jinx mused to herself while the clones started biting one another, and she had to question their sanity when Raven grunted and pulled herself out of the tent. Morning. Jinx said aloud, and Raven merely grunted while stretching out, and then stared at the two clones, as they continued to fight with each other. How long has this been going on? Raven questioned with a raised brow, and Jinx shrugged her shoulders and sighed with a shake of her head. Since before I got up, I think. Jinx admitted and then continued to watch the two clones, with only a mild amount of interest in whatever it was they were fighting over, that was so damn important. Raven mumbled out while sitting down, unconsciously channeling the vast majority of Uchiha, as she crossed her arms and shook her head towards the two struggling clones. Maybe we should try to stop them before they destroy one another. Raven offered, and Jinx considered this for a moment before nodding her head in agreement with the violet-haired girl. I concur. Carry on. Jinx replied while waving Raven towards the clones, causing the half-demon to narrow her eyes on the rosette. I thought you were going to help me with this. Raven demanded in a low growl, and Jinx snorted while leaning back with a smirk. Even with my powers, do I honestly look like I could subdue those two? Jinx questioned pointedly, and Raven grunted before holding a hand towards the two arguing clones who had started to try and beat one another as lightly as possible, so they wouldn't pop out of existence. Azarath, Metrian, Zinthos. Raven chanted, causing a wave of black energy to form over Clone A and Clone B, both clones blinking for a moment before looking over to see the two girls, Jinx smirking cheekily, while Raven frowned. Are you two quite done now? Raven questioned, and the clones slowly nodded their heads before Raven removed the energy from them, both falling back to the ground and grunting. Oi, we really need to pay more attention to our surroundings. Clone B nodded, and Clone A nodded his head in agreement with his partner. What were you two arguing about anyways? Jinx questioned of the two, and Clone A crossed his arms with a frown on his face. Shit here wanted to teach Kara-chan to use a weapon. I argued she didn't have the time. He then said that since she can turn intangible, and we still have Uchiha Madara's old gauntlets, we could at least show her the basics of using them, and Clone A started to explain, only for Raven to quickly interrupt the two in their debate. Wait 1 second, you have even more of Uchiha Madara's stuff besides his mask. And by gauntlets you mean those metal bracelet things you told me he wore on the same night he murdered your mother the first time? Raven questioned of the two incredulously, causing them to wince while Jinx gaped for a minute. Why would you keep anything that belonged to a man who murdered your mother? Especially with how obsessed with the woman you are. Jinx demanded, and Clone A and B looked to one another for a moment, before Clone B sighed and started to trace shapes on the ground with one hand. You're missing the point. I'm an orphan. I like to collect a lot of different things. Hell, Batman does the same damn thing. Clone B replied quietly while tracing out a shape of the Akatsuki symbol on the ground for a moment. It's not why I keep that weapon. It's not why I keep that old costume. Orphans are collectors. Losing so much makes it that much harder to let anything go. Clone B explained, and Jinx winced, mentally thanking Snake for taking care of her, while Raven sighed and looked towards the clones apologetically. So, if that's the case, how much of a collection do you have? Raven suddenly wondered, and Clone A rubbed his chin with a thoughtful look on his face. We have at least one object from every one of our most memorable fights, of our time as a ninja, or our most dangerous enemies, save the one with Kiba when we were younger. Clone A admitted with a shrug of his shoulders, while Clone B nodded his head with his arms crossed. Among other things, I have all of Uchiha Madara's masks, though admittedly some are just recreations, his weapons mostly so no one else would ever use them. Hidan's old scythe, the Kusanagi of course, the 10 rings of the Akatsuki, both Sasuke and Jiraiya's old hit I-8s. And several little knickknacks from my many adventures across the elemental nations. Clone B listed off while looking thoughtful, and Jinx gave both clones a look. Okay, you really like to keep things. Jinx noted with a look, and Raven rolled her eyes while looking to the rosette. Yeah, I know anyways, unless one of you ladies can cook. Clone A started and looked to both Raven and Jinx, said girls grimacing as they both lacked any kind of skill in the kitchen. Right, then I think I'll whip us up some breakfast. Clone A finished while pulling out his scroll and walked to the side where he started work on a fire, Raven looking back to Jinx as he did so. Seeing as he's sharing with us, why don't you tell us about yourself as well? Raven offered while smirking towards the pink-haired girl. Grinning, both clones nodded their heads in agreement, and Jinx sighed while crossing her arms. Not much to tell, I'm an orphan, like Temp here, though I did grow up in Detroit. Jinx admitted, and Raven's eyes shot wide open before staring at the rosette. Detroit? As in the same place where the crow appeared about 10 years ago? Raven asked the girl incredulously, and both Clone A and B looked to one another with raised brows, as Clone A continued to make breakfast for them. The crow? Clone A questioned while turning his head with a raised brow, and Clone B smirked slightly while looking to Raven. A relative of yours, Card-chan? Clone B asked the violet-haired girl, and she gave him an annoyed look in response. The crow is both the avatar of death and an angel of vengeance, sent to wreak righteous vengeance upon the wicked. The girl stated flatly, and both clones shivered slightly, while Jinx nodded her head with a bored look across her face. Yeah, I've heard of that guy, but I never met him. Anyways, I liked pulling pranks for the hell of it back then. I was sort of a hellraiser, to put it bluntly. I skipped school to do whatever I wanted, till I got invited to Darkway Prep, which happened to be a Hive middle school. Officer Jack David Connors, aka Snake, is the closest thing to a father I've ever had, and was the one who taught stealth, evasion, and infiltration to me when I was little. My adopted little sister is Danielle Donnie Phantom, Temp's apprentice. Jinx started explaining dully, as if it was boring to remember her life. My mom was an East Indian sorceress with the ability to control the elements. My dad, well, I didn't really know him, but his name is or was Manx. Thanks to my mom being a sorceress, the vast majority of my friends seem to think my powers are magically based. However, they are actually caused by an unknown internal energy I have that Gizmo says is similar to Temp's chakra, and of course the fact I'm clearly a metahuman also helps. Jinx finished off blandly, and Raven looked at the pink-haired girl strangely for a few moments. You mean to tell me your mother was a full-fledged sorceress, and you don't know any magic yourself? Raven questioned, and Jinx snorted while crossing her legs and arms with a frown on her face. But teachers in magic are rarer in this world than you might think. Jinx reminded with a frown, and Raven slowly nodded her head, inwardly agreeing with the rosette on that matter, as half the books she'd ever seen in this world didn't teach anything useful about controlling or using magic. I have a better question. How do you know all that about your real parents if you're an orphan? Clone A asked with a raised brow, and Clone B nodded his head with a scowl across his face. Yeah. I looked all over Konoha and couldn't even find even one mention of an Uzumaki anything before I turned fucking 16. Clone B added with an annoyed scowl on his face, and Jinx blinked before shrugging her shoulders. I might have snuck into the orphanage's classified files and found some records of my dad, one Tomas Manx. That's how I found my dad. My mom was a little harder, but I eventually met some crazy old man who said I looked almost exactly like Jinx, and the Pinkette started explaining to the two with her before Clone B suddenly interrupted her. Your mom was called Jinx as well? The clone questioned, and Jinx nodded her head with an amused look. Yeah, but that's actually more coincidental than anything else, as I was always Jill Manx, and got my nickname from both my powers and that. Jinx replied and then cleared her throat as she prepared to get back to her story. And as I was saying, this old guy said I look like Jinx, he even showed me a picture. Besides my skin and hair, she and I do look very similar. She even had pink eyes like me, and our facial markings are fairly similar in design, only mine are clearly pink. Jinx explained while pointing to the jagged triangles beneath either of her pink slitted eyes. What kind of powers did your mom have? Raven asked curiously, causing Clone B and Jinx to look to one another, then to the violet-haired Tutana. What? I'm a sorceress too, magic is kind of my thing. Raven reminded the two, and Jinx rolled her eyes before sighing and placing her chin in her hands. Honestly, finding out who she was hard enough. There was no other mentioning of this other Jinx, other than she was a super villainess for a while. Jinx replied, and Raven smirked slightly towards the pink-haired girl. So are you a villain to be like your mother then? The violet-haired girl questioned, only for Jinx to give her a scathing look as her response. Deciding that it was best to keep the two girls placated, Clone A chose that moment to turn around and cross his arms over his chest. Either way, this discussion will have to wait for later, the food's done. Clone A then sat while looking to Clone B, who sighed before he started distributing the food between them. With Naruto. The blonde-haired boy is still walking up a massive amount of stairs, up the side of the strange, almost tower-like structure. Oi, what is this place anyways? And why is it so damn breezy around here? The blonde-haired youth had to wonder as he made his way up the steps, only to curse as the wind grew stronger, nearly knocking him off of his feet. What the hell? He demanded while pushing Chakra to his feet in order to hang on for dear life. Soon enough the breeze died down, and the blonde breathed a short sigh of relief before looking around, then walked up the steps and found himself at yet another shrine. However, this one was different. The shrine was still made into a traditional Japanese style. However, it was much larger than the one he'd seen before, holding an entire almost arena-like area within it, a gate barring access to it made of wavy bars. A pair of snakes forming into a lock of some kind. Also adding to the similarity, however, was a staircase that led further upwards, making Naruto wonder just how far up in his mind he could possibly go. Quite an interesting place. The voice of Itachi came, causing Naruto to whoop around and see the man sitting to the side, leaning back against the shrine with his eyes closed. "Wouldn't you say so, Naruto-kun?" Itachi questioned while looking over to the blonde-haired teen with one eye. Gaping as he saw Itachi, Naruto looked down the path he just walked and back to the man incredulously. "How the hell did you get here?" Naruto demanded, and Itachi opened one eye while looking at the blonde-haired youth. "Same as you, I walked." Itachi replied with an amused look in his eye, and Naruto gave the man a look. "Then why the hell didn't you come any farther before I did?" Naruto demanded, and Itachi made the familiar hum sound before pulling a stick of Pocky from his cloak and started to munch on it. "Because this is your mind, not mine, Naruto-kun. I have no right to see things that you yourself have yet to discover." Itachi replied simply and then returned to munching on his Pocky, Naruto frowning as the man did so. "Where the hell do you keep getting that Pocky?" Naruto then questioned of the man, and Itachi merely made an hum sound and ignored him. Growling lightly, Naruto then turned and walked to the gates and looked at them for a moment, frowning at the twin snakes that made up the latch for the gate. "Now how do I open you?" Naruto wondered to himself while Itachi silently munched on his Pocky, the mere knowledge that the man was nearby causing the blonde to twitch. "Just ignore him and work on opening this gate. Something has got to be at the top of this fucking tower, if it's even here, right?" Naruto mused to himself before looking over the lock with a frown across his face. "No keyhole." He mused while looking to the side to see Itachi munching on Pocky with a bland look across his face. "Where do you even get Pocky around here?" Naruto questioned of the man once more, the dead Uchiha silently shrugging his shoulders before returning to his Pocky. "Well, that was certainly informative." Naruto thought sarcastically before crossing his arms as he looked at the coiled snakes that made up the lock for the gate. "Alright, there's no key, no switch, no lever, and no visible way to open this thing." Naruto inwardly noted before narrowing his eyes on the center of the coiled snakes, more specifically, to the circle that formed between them. 5 holes. He whispered to himself before snapping his fingers with a smirk. Reaching forward, he placed one finger into each of the holes and turned it around, only to stop when he felt the barest hints of a knife on his fingers. "Oh, I get it, turn this thing the wrong way and it cuts off your fingers. Damn, that's a nasty lock." Naruto couldn't help but think to himself, also wondering why in hell his mind came up with a lock like that for this particular gate. Turning the circle the other way, Naruto then heard a click and moved his hand out of the way as the snakes on the gate seemed to come to life. Both hissed while coiling away from one another, revealing a second pair of snakes beneath the first set, 2 handles to the side of the circle. Rolling his eyes, Naruto took hold of the handles, and then turned the device the opposite way. Once that was done, the other 2 snakes uncoiled from one another, allowing the gate to slowly swing open with a creak. "Okay, why did I have such an annoying gate in my head if it's not to hold Kyuubi?" Naruto had to wonder to himself while walking into the arena-like area that had been revealed. Besides being wide open and fairly big for a shrine, the walls of the place were very strange. This was because it looked like a plethora of old-fashioned samurai and shinobi were battling one another, not so odd, but the depictions seemed to be partially real, as they also managed to form out of the walls. "Weird." Naruto mumbled while walking over to one side, frowning when he saw that it was armor that had somehow been embedded into the wall. Looking to the opposite side, he saw the other half of the armor was there in a similar situation, while laid swords were scattered amongst the depiction, handles or blades sticking out of the walls. Frowning for a moment more, Naruto then looked to the floor. Naruto briefly felt a bad feeling creep up at a depiction of a massive-looking 8-headed tailed snake with deep, blood-red eyes that seemed to be spitting out more poison than even Orochimaru's Yamata no Jutsu had managed to do. The true Yamata no Rachi. Naruto wondered to himself while looking at the depiction, only to quickly turn as the gates to the arena slammed shut. "I've got a bad feeling about this." Naruto mumbled before narrowing his eyes and looking all around himself, then felt the floor ripple. Looking down to it, the blonde's eyebrows shot up before following the ripples to the depiction of the Yamata no Rachi, and saw the Kusanagi no Tsurugi slowly rise out of it. "You who wish to wield me in battle." A low hissing voice echoed out from all around, Naruto narrowing his eyes as it did. "I have allowed you use of me, but you must prove thyself worthy of my power, before you can be my true master." The voice continued while the Kusanagi suddenly pulsed, a black-violet miasma forming along its length, and then quickly spreading outwards. Raising an arm and digging his heels into the ground, Naruto staved off the miasma, and then widened his eyes as he watched the glowing Kusanagi pulse once more. The armor and swords that had been embedded in the walls instantly began to shake before breaking free and flying towards the sword. The now 8 swords began to spin behind it in a circle as the armor formed around the Kusanagi. Last was a mask that flew down from the ceiling and spun in midair for a moment before flying onto the face of the now living armor, as it began to hover off of the ground. The armor was that of a samurai, however was a tarnished gold in color. Replacing the body of a man within it was nothing but the strange purple miasma. The mask it was wearing was that of a snake, black in color with painted red eyes and purple markings. Now prove to me your strength, prove that you are worthy of being my master. The armor ordered while throwing its arms to the sides, causing the 8 swords behind it to form a single line behind it. Listen here, I don't care about being your damn master. I know you're a semi-sentient sword Kusanagi, but I'm only here to find out what's up with that weird chakra armor I keep forming, not to take full control of you. Naruto shouted at the armored sword, and it didn't seem to care while it rose off of the ground, hovering in midair while holding its arms aloft. I care not for such a thing. This test must be passed by my new wielder, or I shall simply return to my former master. The Kusanagi stated simply, and Naruto frowned deeply while glaring at the living armor. While he wasn't a fan of being forced into a fight with a sentient sword, he really didn't want the Kusanagi back in Orochimaru's hands. Then it is settled. You and I shall face one another in combat. Should you manage to defeat me, you shall be my new master. Now prepare yourself. The sword exclaimed while the miasma around them began to swirl, blocking any exists and making the blonde gap for a moment. Oh shit. Naruto whispered as it then threw his arms forward, causing all 8 swords to fly forward, the blonde cursing as he flipped back and out of the way. Growling lightly, Naruto then took out 2 kunai and twirled them in his hands before flowing chakra through them to form into 2 blue ethereal blades. Alright, you want to fight Kusanagi, then I'll give you a fight. Naruto declared while crouching into a stance opposite the armored being. The being thus pulled its arms back, the swords ripping out of the floor to flow back to it where it then lunged at Naruto. The 8 swords began to spin around the armored being, Naruto cursing as he rolled out of the way. Sliding to a stop, Naruto saw a portion of the armor was missing at the small of its back and smirked. As if this stupid sword could take me down. Naruto thought to himself while lunging at Kusanagi from behind, only for the armor to spin around, slicing at him with all 8 of its blades. Eyes wide, Naruto slid to a stop and dodged and weaved his way around the blades, as Kusanagi swung them with disturbing precision and speed. Growling as the blades nearly took his head off, Naruto then flipped out of the line of fire and above Kusanagi. Looking up, the armor then spun in place before spinning down into a lotus position, the armor of its hands making a motion as if it were creating hand seals. Don't tell me. The blonde started to think to himself when Kusanagi slammed its hands to the ground, all 8 of its swords flying towards the walls. Arise. Kusanagi declared loudly as hands shot out of the walls, 4 ninja-like beings walking out of the walls to grasp 2 swords each. Eyes wide, the blonde watched as the sword shinobi started to move, and then snapped their heads towards him almost as one. Great, the sword has backup. The blonde thought to himself with a mental grimace as the sword shinobi lunged at him from all sides. Growling lowly, Naruto ducked under a swing from one of the sword shinobi before slicing it in half. However, much to his annoyance, the sword shinobi then seemed to float back together, and took another swing at him. Growling lightly, Naruto evaded the swing and then rolled into another sword shinobi, knocking it to the ground where he then sliced it into 4 pieces, then turned and swung all around, cutting the other 3 in half. However, much like before, the sword shinobi flowed back together, causing a scowl to cross Naruto's lips, as he tried to reason how they were doing that. Evading another slash from one of the sword shinobi, Naruto then turned his eyes towards the Kusanagi. The armored being was keeping its hands on the ground, and as he narrowed his eyes, Naruto saw snake-like trails leading from Kusanagi out to the sword shinobi. Oh, I get it, Kusanagi is using his chakra to repair these guys whenever I destroy them. It's similar to those annoying dryads, only I just have to attack Kusanagi to break its concentration. That should stop these guys completely. Naruto reasoned inwardly while continuing to dodge around the continued assault from the 4 sword shinobi. Alright Kusanagi, no more playing around, I seriously don't have time for games today. Naruto inwardly growled while narrowing his eyes on Kusanagi and moving towards its back, smirking as he saw the hole he noticed earlier. Kigenjin. The blonde exclaimed while swinging his chakra sabers, forming an X-shaped burst of energy that flew straight at Kusanagi and threw it into the air. When it did, the sword shinobi fell to pieces, literally, by turning into a fine dust, while their 8 swords fell tip first into the ground. Watching as the armor came down, Naruto then saw his chance as the Kusanagi itself was revealed. Crouching down, Naruto lunged forward and jumped up to grab the blade, however it spun in place. Mentally cursing, Naruto used a quick Hawarimi no Jutsu to replace himself with a large piece of armor on the ground, causing the sword to cut it in half instead. Impressive, but I'm not done with you just yet. The same deep hissing voice echoed out, while miasma suddenly surged from the walls and flowed into the blade. Man, I hate it when shit like this happens. Naruto grumbled under his breath, then watched as the armor from the sword shinobi and Kusanagi's original golden armor all started to rise up towards the sword. This can't be good. The blonde muttered while the armor started to form together, forming over top the Kusanagi once more. However, this time it took on the shape of a massive snake, the 8 swords from before spinning around its neck, as it hissed loudly, while its mask appeared on its forehead. Boy, it just had to go and turn into another giant fucking snake. The blonde grumbled loudly while twirling his chakra sabers at his sides, and taking a stance against the snake, as it then lunged at him. Batman and Jason Blood were continuing their investigation, this time by looking over the homes of the members of the Order of Scath. Jason was looking over the runes for possible uses besides as a power source, while Batman was using his mask's built-in detective mode to look over the area. Have you found anything, Batman? Jason questioned, and Batman frowned while looking over the room, then narrowed his eyes when he spotted a hidden doorway. Over there. The Dark Knight states while walking to the side and pressed in on a rune, causing a doorway to open up. Walking into the doorway, Batman frowned when he saw how dark it was, Jason conjuring a ball of fire as they explored the cavern. This isn't in any database. Batman noted mostly to himself, Jason rubbing his chin as they journeyed in deeper. Is it possible that the cultists built this then? Jason wondered aloud, and a frown crossed over Batman's features as he did see signs that this was dug out. Possible, but for what purpose would they take the time to dig out these tunnels? The Dark Knight wondered aloud, and a frown crossed Jason Blood's features. From the looks of things, it's most likely that it's so they could gather together in secret. The scarlet-haired man replied while crossing his arms over his chest, a deep frown across his face. If that's the case, then we should be able to find some notes on the summoning ritual they used to call Trigon into our world. Batman mused aloud, only to frown as they came upon a corridor with more glowing red runes. Jason? Batman questioned flatly, and the scarlet-haired man frowned deeply while looking at the runes for a few moments, eyes narrowing as he did. These are transfer runes. They will take the energy from the homes and transport them towards the point of entry for Trigon. Jason explained while following the runes, Batman following behind the man. Soon, however, the two came to a wall, Batman frowning as he looked around the area. Stand back. Batman ordered, and Jason nodded while backing away as Batman reached into his utility belt and pulled out some explosive gel. Spraying it onto the wall in the shape of a bat, the man then backed away and raised his cape. Hitting the switch on his gadget caused the wall to explode in a small shower of rubble. Staying still for a moment, both Batman and Jason braced themselves as the ground rumbled for a moment. When nothing more happened, Batman put his gel away and walked out of the new doorway and into a large library. So this is the library you mentioned? Jason said lowly while looking around, the building being old and dark, books lying on the ground, some half open to show blank pages, others having demonic runes and symbols, bats flying above them, briefly remind Batman of his Batcave. However, he chooses not to dwell on that and instead walks further into the building with Jason right behind him. Looks like it. The building was the original city library, but it was then abandoned after what happened 18 years ago, and was recently condemned along with a large portion of this block, making it the perfect place for the cult's secret meetings. Batman noted aloud while taking a flashlight from his belt and handing it over to Jason. The scarlet-haired man nodded while taking the flashlight and walked over to a few books before looking them over. As he did, Batman surveyed the area, a scowl crossing his features as he did so. Nearby, Jason was looking over the books in the area for a different purpose. Some of these books deal with demonic incantations and rituals, however they seem to be fairly worn and torn. Jason noted while turning a page in one of the books, and then sighed as it crumbled to dust in his hands. These tomes are ancient, and have started to degrade. I won't be able to learn anything useful from them anymore. Jason said mostly to himself while standing up and brushed off his hands, as Batman walked over to a dead end with a frown across his face. My scans indicate a passageway behind here. Batman stated with a frown while Jason reached a hand out to the wall, only to hiss and bring his hand back as an unknown force burned it, his hand smoking lightly as he looked to see a red field of energy briefly flare up before vanishing once more. The demonic barrier doesn't look like Trigon, or perhaps something else, wants us to find out what's in there. Jason noted with a frown, Batman looking to Jason with a raised brow. Demonic barriers aren't a common ability even for a demon like Trigon. They are more commonly seen among the ancient Eastern demons. In fact, the more powerful Eastern demons were well known their use of them. Jason explained, and Batman narrowed his eyes while crossing his arms over his chest. And by Eastern you mean Japanese, correct? Batman questioned flatly, and Jason nodded his head to the Dark Knight. Reaching up to rub his chin for a moment, Batman scanned the demonic barrier with his mask, and didn't like the readings he was getting off of it. How powerful is Trigon? Batman suddenly questioned, and Jason raised a brow for only a moment before answering him. Upon entering into our mortal world, Trigon's powers will decimate the land, the oceans shall become as lava, all life will fade away, flesh shall become stone, the sun shall set upon our world never to rise again. Jason replied, and a frown crossed over Batman's features, as his scans of the barrier continued. I meant in general, S.A.B. What class of demon is Trigon ranked? Batman stated, and Jason slowly nodded his head for a moment before considering that. He is a high A-class demon, but he borders on being a very low S-class Lucifer, and the other demon lords are the only true S-class demons however. Jason replied simply, and Batman nodded his head with a deep frown on his face. Then we may have more problems than originally believed. This barrier has enough energy to suggest it could hold both Superman and Diana at bay fairly easily, meaning that only a high A-class demon could have possibly created it. Batman replied and saw a look of shock cross Jason's features before he scowled deeply. I see, so he's not coming alone. That does not bode well, and worse still, this barrier is fire-based, meaning it's a demon with intimate knowledge of flames and fire. Jason noted with a frown while Batman pressed a switch on his belt, copying the readings of the barrier and storing them away. I'll speak with some of the League about any known Eastern-type demons that could make one of these barriers. Batman then said while turning around, and Jason nodded his head while following the man. I'll look around Raven's book some more and see if I can discern its identity myself. She has a fairly surprising collection of tomes dealing with demons. Jason replied while Batman mutely nodded his head as he walked out of the building with the scarlet-haired man, neither one seeing a blood-red eye, as it opened from the barrier for a single moment, before vanishing from sight completely. Titan's Tower. Starfire half lay on the sofa in ops, a forlorn expression on her face, as she remembers the many happy times she's had with Nightwing Robin. Sighing as she then recalls his leaving the day before, she suddenly leans her head back and then sighs softly, feeling as though a dark cloud was pouring rain down onto her. Getting up, Starfire walks out of ops, the main doors sliding open and then closed as she does so. Making her way into the main halls of Titan's Tower, shoulders slouched, arms hanging at her sides, and a forlorn look still stretched across her face. Walking around Titan's Tower, alone, Starfire wonders if she should go see Raven, only to sigh when she remembers she's at as well. Cyborg was an option, but admittedly, they have had little interaction with one another over the years. Passing by Nightwing's room, Starfire briefly considers trying to find her sister in town, when she notices that his light is on for some strange reason. Stopping and turning, Starfire sees something move in Nightwing's room, and her eyes widen. Moving quickly, the chipper Tamaranian princess rushes to the room, throwing the door completely open as she does. Nightwing, you are. The girl starts to say with a smile, only to blink when she notices green fur instead of pale flesh. The figure, now clearly Beast Boy in one of Nightwing's old Robin costumes, then turns to look at her, and Starfire narrows her eyes, mirroring her sister and looks for a moment. You're not, Nightwing. The princess states flatly while giving the green-furred Tina look that would kill most beings. Grinning nervously, the green-furred Titan then rubs the back of his neck while standing up, Robin's old costume much too large for the youngest Titan. Hey, what's up? The teen wonders aloud, and Starfire marches towards him with a frown across her lips. Beast Boy, why are you wearing one of Nightwing's old Robin uniform? Starfire questioned flatly, hunched down slightly to be at eye level with the now masked teen, and fists clenched at her sides tightly. In response, the green teen could only grin while striking a silly pose. Call me, the Beast Boy wonder. BB replies with a grin, and Starfire rolls her eyes while straightening her back up. You should not be in Nightwing's room while he is away. Starfire notes while looking around the room, and BB merely grins while looking towards her through the simple domino mask over his eyes. Come on, it's fun. BB retorted and then started to throw out random gadgets from the yellow utility belt he was wearing. Look at all the cool stuff in here, he says while grinning, accidentally throwing a flash bomb which explodes off to the side. Narrowing her eyes on her friend, even as she could swear she heard a feline yelp, Starfire reaches out and grasps a stray bird earring from the air with a frown. Nightwing would say that is not a toy. Starfire states simply while lightly pointing the bird earring towards Beast Boy, as he grinned sheepishly for a moment. He would say to leave that alone. Starfire then said while folding the wings of the bird earring down and sighed softly. If you're going to talk like Night, then maybe you should dress like him too. BB noted while opening Nightwing's closet to show several different Nightwing and Robin uniforms, as well as two that look like prototypes for a new costume. He's got more than one uniform. BB noted while wagging his eyebrows, Starfire blinking as she stared at the closet for a few moments. Should I? I would like to, yes, but would it not be a breach of friend Nightwing's privacy to do so? Starfire wondered to herself before Beast Boy sidled up and grinned at the orange-skinned princess. Besides, think about it, Night doesn't wear his old Robin duds anymore, so it's not like he'd miss a pair if it maybe got stretched out. Beast Boy noted while elbowing her slightly, and Starfire had to admit, Beast Boy did have a point, not to mention that the JLU had basically told them to take some time off, and it was just going to be for fun. Back with Naruto. The blonde cursed while flipping back as the armor snake lunged at him with a snap of its jaws. Landing in a low crouch, Naruto narrowed his eyes as the snake hissed and slithered around him. I hate snakes, all snakes, no matter what anyone says about them. So why the hell do I keep meeting up with more commie damned snakes? The blonde wondered of no one while keeping his eyes on the massive armor snake. The set serpent was busy keeping its own eyes on him, before hissing as the blade spread throughout its body all pointed outwards. Widening his eyes, Naruto flipped back as the snake then lashed out with its tail like a massive whip. Watching for its next attack, Naruto growled lightly as it flicked its body towards him once more. Flipping in the air, over several of the sharp blades, Naruto landed on its back and grabbed hold of one of the armor plates that made up its body. Alright, I just have to find a weak spot. Naruto growled under his breath while the snake hissed loudly while twisting and turning in place, attempting to throw the blonde off of its back by any means necessary. Placing the handle of his chakra saber into his mouth and holding onto it, Naruto then gripped the plate of Kusanagi's armor and pulled on it. However, the snake saw this and hissed loudly while suddenly coiling around the blonde-haired X-nin. Crap, should have seen that one coming. Naruto thought to himself while struggling in the serpent's grasp as it tried to squeeze the life out of him. Taking several deep breaths through his nose as it did, Naruto relaxed himself as he twisted his neck around and stabbed his chakra saber into a small hole in the plates of the Kusanagi's armor. The Kusanagi let out a loud cry while thrashing around when he did, and then uncoiled from him. Breathing a sigh of relief for only a moment, Naruto was then thrown off of the Kusanagi's back, as it jumped up and down wildly. Twisting around to face the blonde, the Kusanagi hissed loudly, while Naruto took the chakra saber out of his mouth and spit to the side. I really hate snakes. He mumbled for what felt like the millionth time while the Kusanagi lunged towards him, the 8 swords it wielded spinning in front of it as some kind of shield. Oh shit. Naruto exclaimed while moving back to evade its attack as the swords all arched forward, then slashed outwards. If that had hit me, I would have been cut into a dozen pieces. Naruto realized while sliding to a halt while the swords then returned to their places around the Kusanagi's armored form. Alright, you can fight, but I still hate snakes. Naruto growled out towards the armor snake as it hissed at him once more before twisting around and biting its tail, forming into a wheel. This can be good. Naruto stated flatly, only to be proven correct as black-violet miasma flowed out of its body as it rolled towards him. Damn it, I hate it when I'm right. The blonde said to himself while rolling out of the way of the wheel as it spun past him, only to turn sharply and come at him once more. If I can somehow knock it off balance, I might have enough time to cut through its armor. Naruto thought to himself while considering his jutsu, finally settling on his Rasen Shuriken MK. 2. Forming the attack into his hand, Naruto then ducked to the side as the Kusanagi came at him once more. Turning and throwing the Rasen Shuriken at the Kusanagi, Naruto knocked it off balance, causing it to twist and fall onto his side. Perfect. The blonde exclaimed while lunging at the armor snake and twisted his blades into the armor. However, much to his surprise and shock, the armor was undamaged by his chakra sabers, or rather, it was healed by a quick burst of purple-black miasma, before he was flicked away by the Kusanagi's tail. Grunting lightly, Naruto then looked back to the armor snake, just as it spat out a stream of black-purple miasma towards him. Crap. Naruto exclaimed while ducking out of the way and then lunged at the snake, swinging his chakra swords down into it, only for the armor to somehow remain unscathed. Hissing loudly, the Kusanagi then flicked Naruto away with another quick snap of its tail, causing the blonde to fly back, while it then slithered towards him quickly. Opening its jaws, the Kusanagi then tried to snap them closed on the blonde-haired ex-shinobi. Rolling out of the way, Naruto then watched as it locked its jaws on a portion of the floor, and a grin formed across his face. Finally an opening. He thought to himself while twisting his chakra sabers around, now holding them in a reverse grip as he lunged at the snake. Meanwhile, the Kusanagi struggled with the rubble now lodged in its jaws before spotting the incoming blonde. Narrowing its glowing eyes, the Kusanagi concentrated and the swords that were spread about its body shot outwards and circled around it. Twisting down, the Kusanagi then sent the blades flying towards Naruto at an upward angle. Cursing under his breath and twirling his chakra sabers, Naruto blocked the blades and caused them to fly to his sides, while he landed in a roll and came out in a low crouch. After shaking its head a few times and trying to push the rubble out of its mouth with its tongue, the Kusanagi hissed while it started to detach the armored sections of its body. However, as it did, the 8 swords then rose up and spun around it like a protective shield. Narrowing his eyes, Naruto formed a Rasengan into one hand before launching towards the Kusanagi. Ramming the swirling sphere into the shield of blades, Naruto made it through them before twisting his other hand into a stab, jabbing the Kusanagi and causing it to fly into the air. As it did, the 8 swords and armor all fell to the ground for a moment, only for the Kusanagi to start hovering in midair. Twisting around, it pointed its blade towards Naruto, then the blade lengthened dramatically. Twitching slightly, Naruto rolled out of the way of the attack, as it tore a large chunk out of the ground, behind him. Rearing one arm back, Naruto then threw one of his chakra sabers at Kusanagi, knocking it into the air once more, while he jumped up and reached out for its hilt. Grabbing hold of the Kusanagi's hilt, Naruto cursed as the blades started to fly around. Widening his eyes as he was pulled through the air by the sword, Naruto yelped as it went in every direction it possibly could to try and dislodge him. The sword even tried to flick him off of itself as it twisted around at its hilt. Grunting lightly, Naruto looked down and got an idea to finally finish this annoying match. Gritting his teeth as they came close to the ground, Naruto channeled some chakra into his feet and put them to the ground, sticking to it instantly. The Kusanagi then pulled on the blonde, causing him to grit his teeth as he tried to hold onto the weapon. Quickly dropping his other chakra saber, Naruto then grasped the hilt of Kusanagi with both hands, and pulled it down. Gripping the handle with both hands, Naruto spread out his legs and twisted the sword down, before plunging it down into the ground and held it there. Gritting his teeth, Naruto held the sword down with all his might, while it suddenly started to glow once more. As it did, purple-black miasma formed around both it and the blonde, swirling around them in a rapidly shrinking tornado. Growling lightly in his throat, Naruto then roared out while ripping the Kusanagi out of the ground, the glow around the blade growing stronger, as he then swung the blade around into the tornado, and dispersed it instantly, panting lightly. Naruto then breathed a sigh of relief while looking down to the Kusanagi, as its glow lightened for a few moments before its voice echoed out once more. Well done, Uzumaki Naruto, you have proven your strength, but more importantly, you have proven you have the will to wield me in combat. I acknowledge your ability, take me as your weapon and go forth. The Kusanagi ordered while the miasma that had surrounded them faded away, and the gate to the next flight of stairs opened up. Sighing for a moment, Naruto looked back at Kusanagi for a moment before putting it onto his back, and grabbing the two kunai he'd used as chakra sabers, before stowing those away as well. Oi, this was such a waste of my time. Naruto grumbled out while walking to the stairs, the Kusanagi pulsing when he did. I heard that. The sword stayed and Naruto frowned while turning to look at the blades held over his shoulder. No talking. Naruto ordered and the blade was silent once more, the blonde smirking when it did as it was told. Good. Naruto said with a nod of his head, then made his way up the flight of stairs, wondering what he was going to encounter next. Behind him, Itachi walked past the gates and watched as Naruto made his way up the stairs for a moment. Be cautious, Naruto-kun, not all is as it appears in this place. Itachi noted mostly to himself before vanishing into a murder of ravens that flew upwards, towards the next level of the strange tower in Naruto's mind. Metropolis. The city of Metropolis, a hustling bustling place protected by the Superman and his cousin Supergirl. Currently however we are visiting one of the lower areas of the city, where a man is suddenly thrown clean through a wall to the street on the other side. Growling angrily, a familiar magenta-haired girl stomps out of the building, and then kicks the man in his side. Alright asswipe, stop you bitching you pussy ass wimp, I barely even touched you. The girl growled out angrily while the man silently groaned at her booted feet. The girl is very familiar, as she is one Haruno Ayane, who had managed to possess Haruno Sakura after the inner demons incident. She however is dressed differently than her other self. First is a black midriff-bearing hoodie with red trim and a red circle on the front, a pair of fingerless black gloves with metal knuckles and plates at the backs of her hands, her usual black bicycle shorts, slightly ripped knee-length black socks. Over that is a red pleated skirt with a chain hanging at her left hip, her red banded head IA tied over top it like a belt, a pair of black combat boots, and a short red jacket with her hood hanging down her back over top its collar. Grumbling under her breath furiously, the magenta-haired ex-shinobi then reached down and lifted the man by his collar, with a deep scowl on her face. Alright, listen up asswipe, next time you, or anyone else for that fucking matter, tries to grab my ass, I'll make them wish they were never fucking born. Ayane growled at the man before throwing him to the side and walking off with a huff. Crossing her arms over her chest and walking off, the girl made a mental note to kill anyone who tried to grab her ass, as that had been like the 12th time this week, and it was only Tuesday. And I thought Kakashi-sensei was a pervert. The people of this world are seriously worse. And why are we even dressed like this or in the bad part of town, if you don't want guys trying to grab at you? Sakura demanded from whatever portion of their now shared mind she had managed to find asylum in, and Ayane snorted. Cause I actually like to dress like this, and I'm calling all the shots now, Pinky. That's why. The angry magenta-haired girl retorted while frowning to herself as she passed by a few homeless drunks on the streets. Can you believe how many people have no food or money in this world? Sakura asked in her head, and Ayane scowled deeply as she recalled something similar back in their own world. However, Sakura seemed to have suppressed all the bad things in her life, hence all the anger issues in Ayane. That in turn was also why Ayane had more than a little bone to pick with her sister of sorts. Nami no Kuni war orphans, ring any bells, Pinky? Ayane tried to remind Sakura and got an oh yeah from the girl for her troubles, making her slap her face. Kami-sama, what did Naruto-kun ever see in that stupid bitch? Ayane wondered aloud, Sakura shouting an indignant hey in her head while she then reached into her jacket and pulled out a scroll. In the scroll were several things, mostly her medical equipment she kept stored. However, it also had notes on rumors she'd been following. One of which was for a woman known as Lady Shiva, who was apparently a world-renowned assassin. Others were of other famous villains, as she was sure she was on the JLU's blacklist. Wait, only Sakura was, never mind. Snickering to herself upon remembering that, Ayane then looked at the very few rumors for other world-class fighters. Most seemed too tame for her liking. She wasn't subtle after all. If she wanted something, people were going to know it whether they wanted to or not. Reaching into another pocket, Ayane pulled out an ink pen and crossed out the Hive Academy, as she'd seen the headmaster brother Blood peeking into a girl's locker room, and then promptly threw him through a wall, before kicking the shit out of him for a couple hours before she finally got bored. And gave him one last shot to the gonets with her steel-toed combat boot that, however, was last week, and really not too important at the moment. Still, for the life of me I have to know, why the hell do you dress in that silly punk style? Sakura suddenly demanded, and Ayane stopped, blinked for a moment, then looked to her side at a window. Looking at herself for a moment, Ayane then rolled her eyes and walked off with an amused smirk. Maybe cause it looks good on me. Ayane replied, and Sakura started shouting about it not being her body to dress up, thus causing the alternate persona to ignore her entirely. And in her own defense, she was certain she was not the first or the only one to do so in their life. Amused with herself, Ayane then marked off the Hive on her list of places to find training. Although she also made a note to find some way to break into a few banks and get some money before she ran out. Of course she could always just bust down a wall or two, but with her hair, it'd be fairly easy to find her in a crowd, unless she somehow managed to find a gang of punks just sitting around, of course, but I digress. Clicking her tongue for a moment, Ayane looked over her options with a frown before rolling the scroll up and stuck it back into her pocket with a pen. For Kami's sake, why is it so fucking hard to find someone who could teach me how to fight? The magenta-haired girl wondered to herself before drumming her fingers on her right bicep with a deep frown, and then considered her options. Option 1, try and find a way out of town without money. Not a good idea, she liked eating, unlike Sakura. Yeah, I know, and I'm still surprised you haven't gotten fat yet. Sakura noted with a scowl clear in her voice, and Ayane felt her eye twitch violently for a moment. Boy, newsflash, we're ninja who burn fat off with exercise and training, both of which I do in spades, unlike you. The magenta-haired girl inwardly shouted at her other self, before returning to her prior thoughts from before she was so rudely interrupted by the pink-haired annoyance. Option 2, she could probably rob a bank. Which of course wasn't a good idea, she didn't want someone like Superman or Supergirl trying to stop her. Hey, she was strong, but not that strong. Option 3, find some kind of work for the time being, which sadly enough was her only option. Hello. We're a medical ninja, we could just go to a hospital and... Sakura started to say, only for Ayane to scowl deeply once more, as she crossed her arms over her chest, and wondered if the pink cat was really that dumb. Amaterasu's panties. Could you be any dumber? This world isn't like ours. You can't just show off a hit I-8 and instantly get a job. Hell, they don't even have metnin like us in this world. So how the hell am I gonna get any kind of job without a diploma to show off? Ayane demanded of her alternate, and Sakura was silent, inwardly fuming, as Ayane did have a very good point, but she didn't have to be happy about it. Huffing, Ayane then started to drum her fingers on her bicep again, trying to work out how she was going to get a job. Wait, I can't technically be a metnin, not legally at least, but who said I had to do something legally? I bet all kinds of villains need a healer, and they would pay out of the nose for it to be speedy too. Ayane reasoned while Sakura mentally groaned upon hearing the thoughts going through Ayane's head. You do realize that this is by far the craziest idea you've ever come up with, right? Sakura asked, and Ayane, yet again, ignored her as she made her way through the city with ideas still running through her head. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.